If it's a win-win for one side, it'll work against you on another day. You have to try and get it to the stage where there's peace and harmony and people can move on.
Bertie Ahern is the former Prime Minister of Ireland.
Responsible for the famous accord, the Good Friday Agreement.
He is my father-in-law. Bertie Ahern, everybody! All through the 80s and 90s, Bertie, all I remember of Northern Ireland were shootings and bombings. But when did you decide, right, I have to try everything I can to try and stop this?
It kept on registering with me, like, where is this getting anyone? One day it's a Catholic pub is blasted out of it. Tomorrow it's a Protestant workplace blasted out of it. You start writing, surely someone can do something. To be there as the boy at the start, and then to be there over 20 years later, 25 years later, bringing it all to fruition.
After so many decades of conflict, I am so proud, Madam Speaker, to be the first Irish leader to inform the United States Congress Ireland is at peace.
We had 5% of a chance of getting an agreement. That I think it was the only time in my life I moved from a 5% to 100% in a 10-day period.
Tony Blair, Bill Clinton, George Mitchell, they all took Georgina's hand. They all said, I want you to know.
Wife's lawyer.
Right, my next guest is a 3-term Taoiseach, a custodian of the indispensable Good Friday Agreement, and someone I run a lot of my decisions by. He is my father-in-law, former Taoiseach, Bertie Ahern, everybody!
Thanks, Nico.
How does that feel, me introing you like that?
That's very good, Nico. No better man. No better man.
Usually you're saying to me, Nico, give us another point at the bar there, will you, on Christmas Day?
Yeah, well, that's you have a nice bar. I must say, I always enjoy Christmas Day. We've had some good Christmases in that bar and only interrupted tea to dinner.
Which, if Georgina's watching or listening, is always a very beautiful dinner, let's be honest.
Always a beautiful dinner.
And we've had some great chats through the years, Bertie. Obviously, you know me since 1994. And I think, get the most interesting conversation and the answers when we're really relaxed and having a pint, whether that's in the bar or whether it's down in Kerry on holidays. And I think you'll agree, I always mostly love the history lessons, what it was really like behind the scenes and stuff. I think, would you agree? I think that people always want to know the real, what went on.
Yeah, I think, history, Irish people are particularly good at history. I think, most Irish people like history. It's at different levels. Your own son is passionate about history, Rocco. You have a big interest in it. And I think people of all ages, from old to young, like history. They like to know what happened in times past. Some people want to read huge books about it. Other people just want the short versions of it. But I think there is a good passion for history. And remember, some years ago, there was an attempt to take history out of the school curriculum. And I think both the government and the department were taken by surprise in that there was a huge reaction from the public, and not all the old people, young people and broadcasters, and genuinely there was people said, "Oh no, you're not taking that off the curriculum. You can mess around with other things on the curriculum," as they seem to do every now and again. But history was something people wanted to know, and whether they actually studied it as a school project or a school subject, or just have an interest in it, and in our conversations, when we're talking about the North and talking about the Good Friday Agreement and the years up to it and through it and past it, I think there's that interest in it. And of course, a lot of the things, like often when you'd be talking to me or be questioning me, people actually think there's lots of things that you almost forgot, because at the time you're just going through the process and you're just getting on with the day-to-day issue. Later on they become history. That later on they become hugely important. I was this morning spent 2 hours with a delegation from Cyprus. 20 women, former foreign affairs minister, and academics, ombudsmen, judges, who are working on the peace process, which is peaceful over there and for the last umpteen years. But they come here to see what happened in Ireland. They'd meet the Women's Coalition, obviously, all women. But there is that huge interest in what happened. And all the time, it means there's only 200 countries in the world, and I'm involved with Queen's in the conflict resolution department in Queen's, has the name of George Mitchell. And there's people there from all over the world. And every time I go there, and I'm there regularly, I learn a lot, because you're learning about other peace processes in other parts of the world. Some places that are in violence, some out of violence, some were never violent, so all the time you're learning. But that's all history. And there's all these kids being in early 20s, from all over the world that are in that school, learning about, history and what happened here, and then saying, well, that's not exactly the same as our place. But that's good, because no two conflicts are the same.
Yeah. When you speak so passionately there, even just on history, does that come from your mum, your dad, Drumcondra, Church Avenue back, but you were born in 51. Is that where this comes from, or where did this fall into your lap?
Well, I think I was the youngest, 6, one died, so 5 of us at home.
Oh, I never knew that, actually.
Yeah, when I died as a baby, but still we always include John Joseph, died before me. And so we had always there was a debate in the house, and in our house it was a very simple agenda. It was politics and sport, or sport and politics, and that would be divided, because even my 2 great sisters, Isla and Kathleen, are good sports people too. So all of us would have been onto sports, whether it was athletics or tennis or or soccer or Gaelic or athletics, which Morris was involved in. So we all took that interest, but to be always debating about times past. And it's not that my dad would give much away about what happened in the 20s and 30s. We have a general knowledge from people coming to visit the house in Cork. We knew of his Republican activities. But there'd always be the debate, and you were always learning about, what happened and listening.
Who was chairing the debate? Was it him?
Well, my mother would be trying to call the peace, whatever, about everybody else would be arguing. It'd be fairly passionate now, because everyone would have their view,
yeah.
And it was a strong Republican household. It would be. There would never be much time for the poor British, but it'd be always a lively debate. But I think I probably got my interest, and there'd be always books around the house about the 20s and the 30s and about history, and naturally, and I actually in secondary school I loved history. Most subjects I didn't, but I loved history.
Well, you surprised me actually. Surprised is the wrong word, but during COVID, I remember you on the phone to us or on Zooms to us saying you decided to just pick up Irish history. What Irish history? And you just read it. And
yeah, I did. What I did was, I'd say, it's the only person that ever did it. I was given a presentation when I left as Taoiseach back in 2008 of the chapters of the Four Masters, which is a voluminous volume about Irish history, Irish times, back from way BC, back thousands of years, not sure what year it started. So literally I put it onto my book stand at home, and I think other than opening up the front covers to see what years it covered, never did anything. So in the first week of COVID, I said, I'm going to start going through this. Now, I'm not recommending anyone listen to us actually does it, because it's fairly painful read. But what I did was, I said, I'm going to start this, and I kept at it. And probably did about 30 to 40 pages a day, and they're not long pages. So people say, oh God, is that all you've done? But it's Old English, ancient English. So the words, you had to almost decipher what county they're talking about, what area, because the words were never spelled out. So if you were to take Dundalk, God knows what word it was down for Dundalk. Or so if you're going around the country, you're trying to place the locations and the rivers, because they were all names through thousands of years. We're talking about well over 2,000 years. But it's fascinating. What got me into it was, I said I'd do it first of all as a painful lesson of COVID, reading 30. But there's huge amount of anecdotes, all of the reference notes, where they got this and where they got this. And just to give briefly, way back in the year of dot, like hundreds of years ago, there was a guy in Donegal who had a lot of money at the time. And I don't know if he's into fishing or whatever. But what he decided to do was to get a group of the scribes, the historians at the time from all over Ireland, bring them to his mansion in Donegal and get them to write and to research everything that had been written, mainly by the monks and other poets and others, and to bring all this up to date at a point. So all these fantastic transcripts from here, there, and everywhere were all brought together. So so I kept at it about 40 pages a day. It was worse than homework, but anyway, I did get through it after 4 years. COVID came and went, but I was still reading. But I got through it.
You could probably lecture the historians in Ireland now, the teachers.
Jesus, I'm not sure I remember what's in the first page. It was so hard to read, but. There was 6.5 volumes of it, But anyway, listen. But it was interesting, but trying to memorise and do. But anyway, it passed away COVID.
Yeah, no, fair play. You've always, the years I've known you, Bertie, you always strike me as you don't suffer fools. It's no nonsense, Again, where does that come from? Is that your mum or dad's side back in the house? Like, you're very charming and very approachable. But you don't put up with the bullshit.
No. But I think, and for the job down the years, you're very much working with people, and I had interesting jobs. I worked with board behind the counter, and then I was with older guys in the office who were great people. Probably I went into that office in 20 or whatever it was doing my accountancy, and probably most of them would have been 45 plus, so they're well. Maybe even more than that, a lot of them. So you learned a lot how you get the job done. You could have the chat, but then and then in the Matter days, you were working very much with medical politics. I was dealing with medical consultants
in the Matter Hospital.
In the Matter Hospital, yeah, where I was accountant, and you were working with people who were busy and got on with life, and I got on really well with people like the great Brian Alton and Professor Joe Ennis and Professor Canan and really top guys in the game. So you learn from for meetings, and I was lucky enough to be involved in the in the executive and finance committee and other committees. So you learn from you're doing something, you get on with it and you get it done. And then, needless to say, in my days in politics, the Minister of Labour, I suppose, it's possible where you spend hours and hours and hours negotiating, but you get to the stage that you want to cut out 90% of the nonsense and get down to the temperate. And I worked with great trade union leaders, employer leaders, farmer leaders. So you build up that wealth of experience, but you also learn a hell of a lot, and you make mistakes along the way, and you learn quickly, not to do that again.
Yeah. But again, it's weird, isn't it? Because that's almost strikes as impatient, but actually you've got the most patience probably out of everybody to get the deals done.
Yeah, but you'd always, I would go into most meetings in my life, and I've done years. Don't ask me where I started, and I would say to myself, what is the objective? What is the objective of the meeting? Why are we meeting at all? And what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve? So, the worst thing is to go into meetings where it dawdles on endlessly and boringly and you're not getting anywhere. If you can kind of keep the meeting fairly focused, or you can have the chat at the short chat at the start. I mean, I don't like the meeting people come in and they just say, boom, they're starting off, everything is off, and because a bad atmosphere can build up very quickly. But if you can, if you can generally get the chat going and then try and make it meaningful, nobody needs to be shouting at anyone, but you do need to be trying to find out where is it going and where you're trying to get to. And quickly enough, you'll find out whether it's a total waste of time. You shouldn't have the meeting in the first place. So, but that is important, because if you get the most out of your day, 90-minute meetings, 2-hour meetings max, all my cabinet meetings for 11 years, I think rarely would we go over a few hours, except maybe it was budget time or something like that, where it's big issues or national plans or something like that. But most times 2 hours is enough. Otherwise you start with people repeating themselves, and there's nothing I hate people repeating themselves.
Right, so before I get into politics, go back to the teenage years. What football, Gaelic, what was your What was your priority? And who did you play for? What position did you play?
Yeah, I played Whitehall Column Kills in Gaelic. They were my school from Aidens, and played with them minor under 21. Not a bad player, not a great player. But I played a lot of sport in All Hallows. We were blessed. My dad worked in All Hallows College, which was a seminary for the priests, for the missions, and mainly for America, England, Newfoundland, Canada. And they had fantastic facilities. So we grew up having brilliant facilities. Like there were hot showers in All Hallows in the 60s. That's some of the League of Ireland clubs I don't think have today. So, there was really good facilities. There was tennis and, there was handball alley. So we I think probably the reason I wasn't outstanding at anything was I played everything. But it was terrific way of coming up. But my two, soccer and Gaelic, I followed Drumcondra, which was League of Ireland soccer team. That was the saddest day, I think, when they went out of the league. The league's never been the same since. It's never recovered since, as far as I'm concerned. The old days when Talca used to have 20,000.
The drums.
Where they fitted them in. And of course, I followed Dublin, since we were kids. We were Dublin supporters.
Would Heffo's Army in the 70s have beaten the 6 in a row team?
Totally different game, Nico. Totally different. I suppose the athletes and the strength and the power of Pat Gilroy's or McGavin's team was I don't think anyone would beat them. Even the great Kerry side of the 70s, because the speed and the power and the tactical thing. But you have to say, if you ever get back at Christmas time, I tend to still look back at some of those matches with Dublin and Kerry in the 70s. Maybe the pace wouldn't be the same, but there were fantastic games, fantastic athletes, on both sides. Really, really brilliant players. And, I think maybe more exciting. I think the game, we'll see what the changes come up before Christmas in Gaelic. They're talking about bringing in, changes 2 points if you score from outside 30 metres, 4 points for a goal, doing away with the forward play. You have to keep 3 players back in your own half.
Do you agree with all this?
I think
what's the point of it?
I think you can complicate it. There's one change I'd make, and if my information is right, they're not going to make it. I would do away with the hand pass backwards. Okay. If you want to hit the ball back, fine, but use your foot, which isn't as accurate normally.
Yeah.
But I think the backhand pass is the thing that's slowing down the game and not making it. And why, in the name of God, would any review not do that? And if Mick is listening now, he'd be saying, I shouldn't be saying that. But I think that should go. I really think that should go. And then there's some stupid things they brought in, like the forward catch, the mark, which is totally stupid. If you catch the ball down at your toe, you can get a free kick for it. If you catch it up the sky.
This is where you put your hand up and...
Yeah, stupid. Yeah, but the things like that. Though I hope they just don't make all these cosmetic changes that are there. It's like the offside rule. I mean, you and I were all brought up understanding the offside rule. Now in soccer, you need a bloody encyclopedia to work out what the offside rule is.
And a computer and a ruler.
And 5 guys in the computer centre. Yeah. And they still can't work it out. Yeah. And even the commentators who are doing nothing else except commentating in this get it wrong most weeks. Yeah. I mean, Gary Neville seems to call it wrong every time there's an offside rule, and he has eight Premier League medals. Yeah. So I don't like just rules that do nothing complicated.
Do you ever see a day where the GAA becomes professional?
No, I think it would ruin it. It would be a disaster. I mean, because for this reason, unlike soccer, the club is supreme in Gaelic. You start at 4, playing in the kindergarten and the Gaelic schools in the clubs around the country, and you end up when you're about 45 playing on the junior Z team
and then managing the team.
The same club, and then you want to be the chairman, and So I think to break that cycle. In Gaelic. Now, I've no problem. I think I'm all on for money going into welfare of players and into injuries, so that when they're older, they get money for the physio, the injuries they got, and money going into that kind of stuff. And, if fellas get cars during the summer when they're playing or things like that. But that's a different thing to the professional guy. I don't think it would work actually financially. The model wouldn't work.
Okay. So you're a true blue dub, but as we touched on, your mum and dad are from Cork. So really you're a Munsterman at heart. I mean, you're a farmer really, aren't you? And I know this from the family allotment we have up the road, that I've never done a little bit of planting or digging just yet. Yeah. The kids have, and you're up there all the time. But really, that's where it comes from. Is your dad was a farmer.
Yeah, dad was a man of the land, and my man came from a farm, but she kind of left it when she was young. She went on doing kids nursing. But my dad never left him. My dad spent his whole life. He was farm manager in All Hallows. He came up through the ranks in All Hallows, up to, he was over the cattle first, and then he was over the gardens, and then he ran the whole shebang. It was a big place because at those days it was about 350 students. There was about nearly 100 staff in the place between everything. So, there were, you were feeding 500. It would have been a big village. It would have been. The All Hallows would have been bigger than Sneem, that you and I know well. So, but that's where I got to love it. I worked there during the summer holidays. We worked on the cows and particularly during the summer on the vegetables. I worked on the vegetables and the fruit, and, we'd be always helping my dad. So, I love that, and I love watching things growing. And, as I always say to your children, I'd say it's important that they understand that vegetables and fruit don't grow in Tesco. They grow somewhere else. And I think it's important kids know that. All kids. And
I love the way you say vegetables. That's the real old Dublin, is the vegetables. Love it. Okay, so the Republican background from your mum and dad. Let's ask about your mum, because I briefly spoke to you, but I was doing a bit of research, as you'll probably see here beside me. Was it your mum have a memory? I think Georgina said this to me as well, of British authorities or the Black and Tans coming into the house. Is that true? Yeah, that's true. My mother's house. They say my mother came from Bantry, but what happened is they actually came from a place called Cassandonovan, out between not far from Skibbereen, Drumcondra, for people who know that, and out from Bantry, and they lived there, and then they later on moved into Bantry. But when they were brought up and during the Tan War, they were living there, and they lived on their land wasn't great. My father's side of Cork, the land was very good. My mother's side of Cork, the land was very poor. I hope I don't offend any of them, but it was very poor. And her house backed on literally to a mountain, and there was about 7 or 8 mile, I think at least, of mountain after that in the back of them, and hilly, rocky land. So the IRA, when they were getting away or they escaped, they used that road back out to them and then off into the mountains where they couldn't be followed, or at least the army, British Army, tended not to follow them. And when the Tans came then, the Tans knew that they had to be going out that road, and obviously probably people giving information. But one day anyway, they were regularly coming up and saying, but one day they come up anyway, and her father wasn't well. I think it was arthritis or somebody, but he was in bed anyway. But they brought him out and they threw him over the ditch, literally up ditches. Still there. The ditches are still around the same way. They threw him over and probably leaving him for dead, or because they had taken him out of bed, they realised that he was invalid, or certainly more than semi-invalid. Anyway, it was getting near Christmas, and they had geese, which they'd kept all the year because they were poor, and they'd geese out the back. So the Tans went out and they shot all the geese. And so that was their livelihood for Christmas. And my mother, I swear, never forgot it. she everything the Brits did, well, you said, didn't come back to that, and she hated them, and hated everything about them. And would she tell you this story and more? Oh yeah. My mother, because my dad had the Green Book and he was in the IRA, he tended to stick to the rules. He didn't give you a lot of info. You pick it up from cousins and relations. What they were up to in the Cork brigades. He was in Cork 3rd Brigade and 1st Brigade. And
and served time in a good few prisons for his IRA activities. But my mum just hated him, and she would talk about the Tans, and the Tans were hated. I mean, the Tans were the crowd that were brought in to kind of add to the forces of the army, but they were cruel bastards, and that's why the Black and Tans were hated so much. But in our house, we grew up, and that was only one incident. There was lots of incidents of things that they did around the area where they'd kill people and various things. And when I did that TV program years ago, who do you think you are? I mean, there were things that came up in that I never even knew. But I mean, they were a brutal force.
So then your dad obviously is in the IRA at the same time. Well, not that time, but when he obviously, when he was a man, and he served time. Did he ever discuss his time with you in jail, or was that just a no-go?
Yeah, he discussed the prison. He discussed the prisons. He used to have great laugh out of that. He was one of the first prisoners in Cork that was in the women's prison, and he enjoyed that crack because the men's prison was full. So he was in the women's prison, and I went back to the cell. The records were all there for that program of what prison he was in, and then he was in Tin Town, and he was like all of them. And they were shipped up the coast and the boat.
So do they have the records of the cell, the exact cell?
Oh yeah. And the army guys, the Irish army guys, were able to bring me in Tin Town and the Curragh. And they showed me the exact prison he was in Cork. But in Tin Town, the army fellas were able to give me all the records of. I mean, Tin Town is gone as a prison, but. That was kind of built on the open ends of the Curragh, but they had all the records of when he came in, how he came in, what he had. So it was fantastic. I'd never seen those.
Yeah,
I'd never seen them, and I would have never seen money for that program. And they were able to give you the precise cell and everything, which was in Cork. So it was interesting.
Did he know of your ambition with politics? Did he ever? How much of your career did he get to see?
He saw me up till Minister of Labour. My dad died Christmas 90. So I was Minister for Labour for 3 years at that stage, and I was Lord Mayor. I think he was certainly his health was declining, probably even in the last few years of Minister for Labour. But he did come over to the Mansion House, which he did. He didn't move out much, but he did come over and join up with me in the Mansion House. He was getting a bit more shook that stage, but I think he certainly enjoyed it. And he was certainly delighted when I was elected in 1977 because he was in good shape then. I remember coming back to Church Avenue where I was born and reared, and all the neighbours out, and the Fianna Fáilers, Fine Gaelers, both out, which was nice because you're coming back to your home road. And I think he was tough with that.
Do you think was he a dad who would be? I mean, no, that generation of dads probably weren't so much. But did he show his pride? Did he ever say, "I'm proud of your son"? Or
no, that wasn't a generation. But he would have been. You would know that he was happy, and I think the only thing politically that he ever did, he hated revisionists. He hated people. And some of my last conversations with him, even my brother Morris used to read him some chapters of history books when his eyesight was going, and but he hated people who would try to take today's history or today's thing and to place in what he was thinking of in 1920. He hated this thing of trying to rewrite history, as people do all the time. He had no time for that. I mean, he said he lived in this time. The actions they took in that time was for that time. What De Valera or Collins or any of them did, that was that time. This is this time.
It's not relevant.
And these people who try to replay, he's no time for Google historians that you have around the place now.
He took part in hunger strikes as well, didn't he?
He did a few of them, and he did that long one. How many days it was, but he did that long one, which didn't do much for his kidney or his system. For all of his life, he had some problems, not horrendous problems, but he had problems because he did that long strike, whatever it was. I forget how many days it was, but it was a long strike.
When the troubles from the late 60s then started, it was a different type of, I suppose, IRA campaign. What was his view on that?
Well, I think he would have been big support of the civil rights movement, which is what the troubles in the North grew out of. because they were fighting for better housing, better education. My father would not have been a person who was wanted to leave go the idea of a united Ireland. He would have been. He was anti-treaty, and he wasn't anti-treaty because of the monarchy. I mean, there were some people, they say now, the treaty broke down because there were people that had to pledge sovereignty with the king. That was a problem. But my father's would have been, his problem was that this was not achieving a united Ireland. That was where he came from. He was a united Irelander. So he would have seen the civil rights movement, not so much of being going to achieve a united Ireland, but it was going to give, one person, one vote, education, health, housing to nationalists. And he would have been very pro-nationalist, very, very pro-nationalist. I think one of the happiest days I think I ever saw him was when Down won the All-Ireland in 1960, because the cup was going across the border and he was so happy. Right. This was the cup going across the border.
It was all Ireland inclusive.
That was all Ireland. Yeah. That was a big thing for him. He was delighted. Yeah. We went into town that night. I often think back, we must have been Down supporters because we spent the night in Parnell Square.
So on that, I mean, I suppose it crosses over here because then you get into politics. He sees that, and he watches you right up to Minister for Labour. Did you think much of him then when you went on to become Taoiseach? Obviously, your mum was still alive then.
Yeah, my mum was still alive. Kind of your focus kind of goes on then to your, obviously my father and mother were both Fianna Fáil. They were Dev. I mean, they were Republicans and went with the Dev side of the. In 1926, when Fianna Fáil was formed, they were Fianna Fáil, strong Fianna Fáil.
And was that non-negotiable in your house? Was that just
no? That was Fianna Fáil. There was no other party. Right. It was, and Civil War politics took a long time to go, but also social politics. I mean, my father was a card-carrying member of the Farmers Union. There was a section of one of the unions that was farm workers, and he was that. So he would have been very socially conscious about that, and watching the development of the country and development of Ireland, getting on and generating employment. So he was keen on, he read the papers every day, the Irish press obviously, and so he was, and then when he died, we continue on. My mum took a huge interest in my political years. I mean, she would do the phone, and party work was coming to Church Avenue. In some of my early elections, I used actually the front room of Church Avenue as my headquarters, so everyone was coming there. He was feeding them apple cake and apple pies.
It's mad that somebody like yourself and everything that you went on to then achieve and do. And we, with Rocco J and Gia and Georgina, will meet you at your house and walk down past that house, that old Church Avenue house, and walk down to Croke Park to see some of the games.
So we're doing the same as we did 65 years ago, because we went to Croker nearly every Sunday. Or normally in those days there were matches in Croke Park every Sunday. And people didn't go home to the country back in the 50s and the 60s like now. Everyone is, you see the buses bringing them all off on Friday evening, they're back late on Sunday night or Monday morning. But in those days, people were around. So Croke Park, if Ragball Rovers were playing in Croke Park, a club match to be over 10,000 there, any match would be 15, 20,000 if there was an Oireachtas tournament or grounds tournament or, any of the trophies that used to be around there. So it's so different now. We would go to club matches. We'd go to different club matches in that my dad had an association with them. So it was it was a cheap way of living too, I mean, they hadn't got much money, so you're going to club games, and if you had to pay in, you were only paying pittance anyway. So it was but we did the same thing as we do now. Yeah. We walked down that road.
And so it lives on. When you when you got into politics, was that to help people? Was that because you had such a Republican view and you thought you could help down that road, or what was the beginning of politics? Yeah,
I was secretary of a residence committee. We had founded a football club in Drumcondra, which was it was Alhampton Football Club. They're coming up to having their 50 years. celebration shortly. They were meant to have it about 4 years ago, and COVID stopped it. But it wasn't just soccer. We were doing other things as well. And so I got used to the thing of trying to organise pitches and competitions. And then my brother Morris was in Clonliffe Harriers. I went out shaking boxes to raise money for Morton Stadium. My brother Noel was in IR and the girls were playing tennis. So we were very much into sport and organisations, social organisations, activities. Yeah. So that was kind of the motivation. You know, all my early letters writing would have been on behalf of trying to get a few quid for this, that or the other for sport and organisations. So that's where I probably came to prominence in my own area and then I was on Charlie Haughey's health committee because I was now working in the Matter. And when Charlie came back into the front bench, I was in the Matter. So he asked me to go on the health committee. So I was working from 76 when it was, working on that. So I was very much involved in all community activity. So it wasn't really to do with the North or to do with the Troubles. Were just ongoing at that stage. And, you know, they were a long way off anyone seeing any light in the tunnel.
What year did you start, Paul? 81?
I was elected 77.
77, sorry.
But I joined Fianna Fáil in 1971.
Okay.
And I'd helped out in the elections in 61, delivering leaflets in the doors, and in 65 we were doing the posters. So I mean, we had spent almost 10 years helping the party in Drumcondra at that stage. And one of our school teachers, not one that I had, but one of the teachers in the school, was a member of the local Fianna Fáil company and ran in a by-election which he lost. Paddy Belton beat him. So we were, even in our school years, we had an interest in politics.
I was born in 78, and all through the 80s and 90s, Bertie, all I remember of Northern Ireland was shootings and bombings every single week. And if it wasn't a real bomb, it was a bomb scare. And then sometimes there was a bomb and nobody would die. And then sometimes it was horrific. And, you know, we all remember some of the big, like Enniskillen or Omagh or the Shankill Road or Canary Wharf in London. And it was ongoing, and soldiers being shot and punishment beatings and punishment shootings and civilians, you know, innocent people dying. And so that was, I'm not sure people of today, even my children's generation, I mean, thankfully will never know any of that, right? Or unless they look back over history. When did you decide you become Taoiseach, and I'm sure that's a very glorious moment in your life, but when did you decide, right, I have to try and stop, I have to try everything I can to try and stop this or help this?
Yeah, I think probably, as you described it, so I won't redo, but if you take the amount of people that died in the North, if it had been kind of an American city, which I often, you know, you're meeting American groups that are over American politicians, like that would have been about 30,000 people in your average American, you know, state. So it's an enormous amount of people that were killed and injured, and the mayhem and the damage that it caused. I suppose when I was spokesperson on Labour and the public service in the early 80s, I'd got to know John Hume really well. I had been whip at the party, just jumping very quickly. I was assistant whip late 70s, then early 80s. And because I was Dublin based, there was a lot of meetings held on Friday or Monday from the Northern groups that come down. Charlie Haughey'd have the meetings, and you'd be brought in. Sometimes you'd be just brought in to make up the numbers. You know, you were the kid in the block. But at the same time, you got to know the guys, Seamus Mallon and John Hume, and, you know, Eddie McGrady, and, you know, somebody, Austin Curry, and all these guys, Paddy Devlin. So I knew these guys personally from 79 on 80, and it wasn't that I was going home saying I need to do something about the North, but it was all the time getting in, and they were coming in. Then there was the hunger strikers and all the trauma that came out of the hunger strikers, and then there was the innocent people being killed, and through that period, it kept on registering with me, like, where is this getting anyone? Like, one day it's a Catholic pub is blasted out of it. Tomorrow it's a Protestant workplace blasted out of it. You know, the Miami show band, you know, it just go and next day another thing. And you started writing and said, well, surely someone can do something. And it was would come up in the party all the time about flying over the border and helicopters flying over the border and what Secretary of States were doing. So it was endless. It was just endless. And I think it didn't seem to be going anywhere. After Enniskillen, just go very quickly, Enniskillen's 87, 88. And after that, there was a rethink everywhere, I think, about is there another way? Now, that didn't happen overnight. I think there was some of the religious, Father Alex Reid, the Redemptorists in Clonard and Belfast. He was trying to pull in the IRA. Adams McGuinness were trying to get a handle on things. Charlie Haughey started to talk. And that went on for a few years. And then Albert came in and took a really active interest in trying to do it. And then, just jumping again, Albert was at this in 92, 93. And Albert, by his nature, was a businessman. He was a deal maker, he was a wheel maker. He was in the music business, as you know. And so he was used to dealing with North and South. He knew the promoters. He had a hand in one form or another in about 20 ballrooms around the country, the show band era. So he kind of knew a lot of people. And he started trying to say, well, what can we do? So then it was decided in 93, what we try and do, and this was very much Albert and John Major, to write down what's the causes of this conflict and what do people want and what can you possibly put in to try and get movement. And that became known 15th December 93 as the Downing Street Declaration. And anyone listening to us, it'll take them about 6-7 minutes to read the Downing Street Declaration. And it kind of gives what the blueprint was. Short document, but hugely important. And then that led into more detailed documents. That led to the ceasefire in August of 94. The Loyalists won October 1994, and then that kind of broke down later on, but it never got as bad again. So all that period, and it's where people started talking and looking, and so it took a good few years. I mean, that process started in 88, and when Tony Blair and I sat down to negotiate the agreement, it was 97. Was that whole, so it didn't happen overnight.
So the governments of the early 80s, or the late 70s, early 80s, the British and Irish governments, did they not get on? Did they not have the...
No, they didn't, is the answer to that. I mean, there was very little engagement. And even Irish America, I know people now always ask me, why didn't Irish America get more involved at that time? Why didn't they do this and that? Well, the reason was that at that stage, the British influence, of course, Americans were caring about what was coming out of Ireland as they would today about Gaza or Ukraine or anywhere else, Sudan, Congo, anywhere. They were taking an interest, Americans always do, to their credit. But the story that was coming out, the British would say to them, and I suppose the best example is this, was Thatcher and Reagan, both great leaders in their own way, though it wouldn't be my cup of tea, but they were great leaders and were there for a long time. But Thatcher would say to Reagan, this is none of your business, this is a British issue. Northern Ireland is British, so they wouldn't really pursue it. And it was only when Clinton came in 92 that Clinton started listening more to the Irish lobby. And then he went against his own State Department, to his credit, given the visas to bring over Joe Cahill and IRA guys to America. And all of that kind of, was, they were all stepping stones, to look at the stepping stones. But if you take it, 88, Downing Street Declaration 93, ceasefires 94, ceasefires breakdown 96, 97, Tony Blair and I kind of start the process again, get the ceasefires back, 98 Good Friday Agreement, then about 5 or 6 years of trying to get it up and running, so it was a long process. And I suppose from my point, I was lucky to be there as the boy at the start, going to the meetings with not much power system whip, isn't exactly a big job, but being there at the meetings, and then to be there, over 20 years later, 25 years later, bringing it all to fruition. So, but it's a long saga.
But I'd also add to that, and I've probably blown a bit of smoke here, but with your background, knowing what you knew from day dot, from your dad, from your mom, and you came in 97, and you equally came in with somebody like Tony Blair, but used to share his holidays in Donegal as a kid. And I think he also was young and popular in 97. And the both of you then ran with this idea of fixing this scenario or trying to do your best.
Like we were in touch every week, regardless of what was happening. And admittedly, he was always busier. But, you know, and at that time, you had the conflicts going on in Zagreb, and you had Yugoslavia, and, you know, there was terrible stuff going on over there at the time, terrible mayhem. But, you know, all the way from when I started working with Tony in 95 in opposition, the two of us were leaders of the opposition, you know, following on what Albert, the good work Albert did. We continued that, you know, right through to the days we finished. And of course, I continued on to this day, been involved in several ways in the North. So it was that, you know, incremental, slow thing. And you watch it from, like in the early days, I remember going over to the Oxford Union debate this every year, where politicians from the North and the South go over to Oxford one year, Cambridge, and it's kind of the only place they used to meet. And there'd be a weekend of dialogue and talk. But I used to see these fellas, and they hated each other. They wouldn't stop to have a cup of tea. They wouldn't say hello to each other in the loo. It was, and you're trying to say, how in the name of God can you ever get these people into the one room? But, you know, you just keep at it. And the funny thing, the question that goes, and it's always very interesting. People say they must be torturous meetings when you had Sinn Féin and the Unionists in the one room for all those years. The amount of times that both of them were in the one room together was very few, because we had to be the go-between, because if they were together, they'd end up killing each other. I
was lucky enough to last year to go up to the 25th anniversary, where yourself and President Clinton and Tony Blair were sitting down doing a great speech, which was chaired by Hillary. And Tony tells a great story and he actually thanks you publicly. Not a lot of people know this, but in the private room backstage, or before and after, when myself and Georgina, the three kids, got to spend some time with them, they all took Georgina's hand. And they all said, Tony Blair, Bill Clinton, George Mitchell, they all said, I want you to know, and this is probably talking to school here, but they all said, I want you to know it wouldn't have happened without your dad. And I want how much effort, time, energy he put in. They both says more than the two of them. And there's other, I'm not giving it all to you here, but they do genuinely say that. And they do say you were like a dog with a bone. You didn't care what anybody said about you. You saw the results somehow.
Yeah, and I think in fairness, it's nice and said that, but I think we had a small team, and I think that was hugely important. And, you know, in fairness, my party backed me at that stage. People left me at it. And, you know, the public and even the opposition, in fairness to the other parties, they left us at it, and they kind of trusted that, you know, we weren't going to do anything crazy. But it was very much, you know, for a long time, one step forwards, two backwards, you know, one sideways, you know, trying to get people to listen to us, trying to see if they'd work together, get compromises. But you know, I ended up friends with them all. I mean, John Hume was a great man. David Trimble, you know.
That's the thing I don't like. And to your credit, like, you know, you've told me, I don't know how much you want to say on here, but you told me about people who've shouted at you, what they've said to you in those rooms. And Tony Blair touched on, actually, we have a video here of Tony Blair. Just if you just pick up the cans there and have a little, no need to put them on, just listen and turn around and watch what Tony says here.
Well, for Bertie, I should say, too, they were particularly difficult personally, because you lost your mother, I think, just as the process began, and you came straight back afterwards, which was enormously helpful. I just want to say this about Bertie as well. He had that, it's a great political ability if you have this. I mean, he took lots of abuse during the course of this process. I mean, people would come in and be really rude to him, and I get offended on his behalf, but he was never really offended. He would just shrug his shoulders and say, they can say whatever they like, we just got to get the deal done. And it's a really interesting, anyway, I've always wanted to say publicly, properly, thank you, because it would never have happened without that.
As he says that, it must bring you back to the world media watching, fear of failure, or is that not in your psyche at that point?
Well, I think we didn't certainly.
Sorry, but just pull that slightly.
Yeah, we certainly didn't want to fail as best we could, but there was no certainty. I think we weren't thinking that way in the last few weeks, and the opinion polls kind of had set it up. The Belfast Telegraph done a poll about a week or 10 days before the final night. I think it said we had 5% of a chance of getting an agreement that everyone would sign up to. I think it was the only time in my life I moved from a 5% to 100% in a 10-day period. So, and you know, there was a lot of pressure. I mean, the reason David Trimble, who I ended up being great friends of him and his family, and you know, his wife and his children are very good friends of mine now. And, you know, Azim Paisley there, but David in particular, he was under fierce pressure. So he'd shout and he'd abuse and he'd get up and he'd rant and he'd rare. And, you know, and then maybe an hour later he'd calm down, he'd have a sensible conversation with him. They weren't easy. I mean, they weren't the most rational of people. They're very clever man, very legal mind, and very brilliant lawyer. But I mean, I suppose the pressure got under them, and it was the same with a lot of the others as well. Some people were very good and calm. Monica McWilliams, the ladies with Women's Coalition. Some of the others were kind of, but you just had to take it and keep moving on. But I would see it always as the end line, where you're trying to get people, you know, listen to what the important points they're saying, and then see what you can do, and don't mind the ranting.
Was your dad ever in the back of your mind, you know, his views? Like, you know, did you have to show some sort of a certain amount of forgiveness or understanding to the other side, if that's the right way of saying it?
Well, I'd always be thinking, I mean, in negotiations, in whether I was involved in negotiations all my life, 30, 40 years of it, but sometimes it's negotiations are, you know exactly where you know where you want to be. But most of the time, it's you're looking for the middle ground. You're looking for the compromise. You're looking for what would carry. And you always have to remember negotiations. I think it's the same in life as it is in the kind of tough negotiations I was in. I was, European Constitution, the funds for Europe, and all the crazy things I'd done during my life. That if one side win, it means the other side loses. And if one side win and the other side loses, the side that loses will be waiting for the next day. And it's what I don't understand with, say, Israeli policy on Gaza. Those kids that their brothers and sisters and mother and fathers have been killed, I mean, what are they going to grow up with? Are they going to grow up saying we'll go to Tel Aviv on our holidays and cheer for the leader in 20 years' time? And I think people have to realise that, it's these things come back on you. And you have to try and get an honourable solution that people feel that their hands are on this and that what sacrifices they're making, that the others are making as well. If it's a win-win for one side, you can be sure, as we're sitting here in this studio, Nico, that it'll work against you on another day. So compromise, and not compromise for the sake of compromise. There are some people who don't know what they're talking about negotiations. Compromise is a sign of weakness. You're giving in. It's a sign of compromise. If there's two sides of a story, you have to try and get it to the stage where there's peace and harmony and people can move on. And that means getting an honourable compromise.
When you look back at those rooms, when you bring yourself back, do you remember how fractious it actually was? Was there times when people walked out, walked in, walked out, all of that? Oh yeah, and I mean, it was very, there were times where it was horrendous. I remember, you always remember, I think probably two incidents. I could give you 52, but give you two. I remember going in, Tony Blair said to me one time, listen, Bertie, I think you should meet all the paramilitary representatives
better I don't go into that. You'll handle them better. And I said, okay, Tony, I'll go in. So I meet all these guys from the Red Hand Commanders, the UVF, the UDA, representatives of Sinn Féin who were clear IRA people were there. And so
But they were all in the one room.
All in one room. I met them all. And it was one of the rare times that we would have had them all. But it was the individuals. It wasn't the whole delegations. It was the people who were involved in the troubles. And of course, everyone knew when you walked in that way. And one individual I won't name because he's still under some bother within his own movements out of the country, that he said, you're no prime minister, because they wouldn't say Taoiseach in those days. Even though
they wouldn't use the Irish word?
No, at that stage they wouldn't, but they did later.
And that didn't bother you?
No. And he said, he said, you're the odd man out in this room. There were no women in it. And he said, I looked around and I said, well, this is obviously something to do with violence, And he said, and I said, no, I can't guess, And he said, as far as we know, you're the only one who hasn't murdered anyone in this room. And he did it, I think, to identify who he's in the room with, but also to let me know what they were and to try and throw me off a little bit,
Intimidate, kind of.
Yeah. And he was that kind of a person. But I mean, I just shrugged it off, and I thanked him for understanding that I didn't kill anyone or something like that. Just move on. And then I remember another time when I had a secret meeting in Dublin, which everyone thought was in the north.
But this is the one I didn't know whether to ask you. You told me about this, and I don't know if this is public, so I wanted you to tell this story.
No, this was a true story. It was felt at a critical time that I should really hold a hand of friendship out to the loyalist guys, to the key guys on the loyalist side, not the parties, not the political representatives, but the actual UDA, UVF and Red Hand commanders. So there was a lot of to and fro about where the meeting should be. Anyway, in the end, it was agreed with the help of Archbishop Eames that we would meet in a small church in South Dublin. I won't name the church. And not that I think I know where it is, but anyway, I couldn't drive there because it was a secret meeting. So one of my security guys got a van from the guards, one of the undercover vans, which was a relic of a van. And he backed it in, and he had a few...
But can I just add to this, Bert?
Yes.
The guards who were looking after you, your Taoiseach of Ireland, you've armed security all day, every day. They didn't know about... You only told one of them?
Only one.
Would they have told you not to go?
I don't know, to be honest, but I'd say the advice from on high in the guards, I'm sure, was, we need to tell us so we've more undercover there, because nobody else knew. And so I had one guy with me, Martin Mansard, the great Martin Mansard, and but he got there separately. Because we couldn't take the risk that someone would follow. So anyway, I got into this postal van that came in under the arch of government buildings and drove me to this place and went in. So, but I went into the room and nobody stood up.
So you just remind me who's in this room now you're going to?
These are the key guys from the UVF, the UDA and the Red Hand Commandos.
South Dublin Church.
In South Dublin Church.
And they're meeting the Taoiseach.
Probably for most of them, never in Dublin before. So I go in anyway. Martin was there already, or waited for me at the church. So in we go. Nobody stands up. Nobody says hello, Taoiseach. Thanks for meeting us. Blah 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 blah. So I didn't used to it. So we had a meeting. But the gas thing about the end of that meeting, which we forget about, we went through all the stuff, and we got friendly and chatted and listened and explained their position. But at the end of the meeting, they all stood up and all shook hands to me. And one of them then, who was a very senior guy, again, better not say his name, but he was probably the most senior guy, he turned around and he said, well, Taoiseach, he said, you came to meet us in this secret location and we saw the van coming in, so you came secretly and you've no security. We appreciate that. But would you bring us into your office to meet us, thinking that I'd say no? And I said, I will. The next time we meet, you can walk in the gates of government buildings, which they did. Now, most people thought that meeting was the first meeting. It wasn't. Right. But there was silence because they did not think that the Taoiseach, and maybe a lot of people might think he shouldn't have given them the respect. But from my point of view, I was trying to do a certain job. They said, we will, and we'll come to the meeting. And they did. So I don't know how long later, but not that long later, we had a meeting in government buildings.
But you were slowly winning their trust. You were slowly, I guess.
Yeah, I was listening to, I think they probably would have said, his dad was an IRA man. Okay, it was the old times, and he's a Republican, he's a Fianna Fáiler, and he's the inner city, and, blah, blah, blah. He'll only take their side. But I think over time, they saw that Tony Blair and I were both working very closely together to get as what we used to call then a comprehensive settlement, but also a broad basis of progress. So I think they began, even these were the hard men. These were hard men. And, I don't really ever want to know what they did or didn't do, but I mean, they were the hard men. I met a hard men on all sides. And, so they respect, but, it's no good having a peace settlement that has the people signing up to it who are not involved and causing the trouble. I mean, it is risky, of course it is, and sovereign governments have to be very careful of who they deal with. But at the same time, if your job is to end the violence, you have to try to bring those that are engaged in the violence. It's no good getting a crowd of academics to agree what we should have done. That might have been very useful. But what we were trying to get to people who were actually killing people and blowing people up and directing people to kill people, they were the people we had to convince. And the only way I could think of doing it was to meet them.
Look in the whites of their eyes.
Looking, and they look at me. I mean, it was not much good me writing a letter to them up to West Belfast or East Belfast.
Yeah. You won't answer this, but I'll say it. Any of the Taoiseachs, post you or pre you, would any of them have done what you did in that church that night?
I can't really answer. I think there were risks, there were risks. But in fairness, I'd have to say the political class of the time supported my efforts. They didn't know exactly what we were doing, but they did support it. There were a few things later on people niggled at, and I couldn't understand that. But I think generally the political class supported our efforts during that period through the 90s and the noughties. And I think that's a good thing. And, in fairness, there's several Taoiseachs now I've engaged with over the last 15 years or so in trying to help to organise meetings and help to do some of the things. And there has been some secret meetings since, and I've been party to those. So I think that's necessary. There's no violence now, so it's far easier. Yeah. But it is still necessary for political leaders to do these things.
I mean, obviously, it was the result in the end is undeniable. Obviously risky, and obviously, were you afraid in any of these meetings? Would you have done it up the north in East Belfast?
No, yeah, I did. I went with Davy Irvine, God rest him. He brought me to a few she beans in the days to meet some loyalist guys. So. You had to. I never really,
And again, I think you told me before they didn't expect you as Taoiseach to go to
they didn't.
Into the lion's den, so to speak, and meet them personally.
There were a bit of some of those things are risky. I wouldn't be advocating that everyone would do that, but there was a time that it was very important because they were trying to say to people, listen, these guys are okay, and we think we can do business with them. So. You had to back them up.
Right.
So they were saying, well, we think this guy come and talk to you. And if you didn't, you were leaving them down. So it wasn't a question of leaving you down, you were leaving them down. So you had to, and I got very friendly with a lot of obviously the Sinn Féin people, but also with the likes of Billy Hutchison and Davy Adams and, poor old Irvine before he died. And, they were good people in my view.
The critical elements of the Good Friday Agreement near the end. I watched the interview with you where you said Tony Blair had a lot of important decisions to make in the final few hours, as did you. Prisoners and articles, was it 2 and 3?
Articles 2 and 3.
Were they the two biggest?
Yeah,
issues?
they were the two. I don't think. Well, there's no don't think. It's definite. If Sinn Féin wouldn't have come on board if prisoners weren't part of the settlement. To a lesser extent, loyalists. Sinn Féin wanted the prisoners out in 1 year, and British government wanted 2, and the loyalists wouldn't agree to 1 either. They agreed with 2. They agreed with the British government. So that was on that one. That was a big risk, leaving out hundreds of prisoners, and a big decision for Tony. Now, I had prisoners too, but not anything to the extent. And then the other one, if I didn't move in Articles 2 and 3 and to the new wording that we worked out at that time, we wouldn't have got the unionists on side. So they were the big decision. There were lots of other. I mean, it was a comprehensive settlement.
Can you briefly describe what Articles 2 and 3, just in case anybody doesn't know?
Articles 2 and 3 was the territorial claim that was there since 1937 in De Valera's constitution, that claims that we had jurisdiction over Northern Ireland. Effectively, we, Leinster House, the Dublin government, that Northern Ireland was ours. Now, we never in effect operated that because it was just there, but it was something that the unionist people, really resented, that even though they were a part of the UK and there were the agreement in 1921 and everything, but that they really resented that. And of course, when we dropped that, the North-South bodies, and due to speaking in the North next week about the North-South bodies, but that was our involvement. So while the territorial claim came, it meant that the North-South issues, which will deal with certain issues on the North and the South, that would be a new structure called the North-South bodies now. So that's a very important part, and it's very important, I think, that people understand that the North-South bodies were the quid pro quo for the amendment to the Constitution. Sometimes I think people, including people down here, forget that, so they need to understand that and remember it.
And again, I don't want to harp back to your mum and dad, but was that a big deal for you to go, right?
Definitely.
We're taking this out.
Definitely. If you take Articles 2 and 3 out, but it had to be North-South bodies put in. And that was ultimately the deal. My last conversation with mother was about Articles 2 and 3. She said, do you know what you're doing? Don't trust the Brits. And she never did. And I suppose, I trusted Tony Blair, but wouldn't necessarily trust the Brits.
Did you ever think in your heart of hearts, when your head hits the pillow, oh God, is this the right thing? Or, how much do you question yourself? Yeah,
I don't really. You'd always like to see things moved on. It's always difficult, when you're there in your charge and you're the driver of it. That's great. You do sometimes worry that we won't live forever. Blair and I'll move on, and a lot of people who negotiate that deal have already moved on. Unfortunately, they've gone to their eternal reward. So you're always worried that others mightn't remember. And that's why I emphasise North-South, why North-South is so important, and why that must be maintained. And, I quite frankly think maybe a bit more could be done about that now.
Okay. And Blair, you said big job, more prisoners, like the British government allowing IRA prisoners out was obviously a big... Yeah, sure.
Decision. And that was a huge worry. And, we were all worried about that. As it happened, the prisoner release program went very, very well. And very few, if any, of the prisoners created any trouble afterwards. A lot of them went back to their former combatants. They joined up community groups, and they did a lot of good things. And there was a few of them might have caused trouble, but they might have had their own difficulties. And, it wasn't anything to upset the process. So the prisoners were an essential part of and I told this to the Spanish authorities after we did the Basque Country deal, and I said, you're not going to sort this out until you deal with the prisoners. And they said, we're never going to deal with prisoners. But I'm glad to see that they are nowadays, some years later, dealing with prisoners.
Did Bill Clinton have a view on either of those topics, 2 and 3, or prisoners?
No, he didn't. I think he would have been strong on the legal issues. He was strong on the criminal law and the reform of policing, and he knew that you had to change the old RUC. You had to do it in a fair way that was fair to to everybody, because the RUC would have been very close to the minds of a lot of unionists and loyalists. So you had to try and reform that in a way that wasn't going to be offensive. And I think that was done. Probably the one that we didn't do as great a job, but it took too long to decommission the arms. And that did have a knock on to the political, it created a lot of political instability. But, you know, in some ways they say that it delayed things for maybe 3 or 4 years. When you look back now and say that wasn't really that long, you know, but it did cause problems.
Okay, well, that brings us on then to the United Ireland question. Where do you see, because I think it's written in it that it allows for a border poll. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So where do you see that now? Because I know current Sinn Féin would be, you know, looking, well, I'm not paraphrasing it, or I am paraphrasing, they're looking to do that soon. You don't think that would work? Do you still see United Ireland? Do you still want United Ireland?
No, I do want to see United Ireland. I'd rather call it now a new Ireland, because I think it's a better way to try and get everybody to work to a new Ireland, where people, the United Ireland kind of tends to kick back to the past, but a new Ireland where we all want. And my view is simple enough about that. I want to see it. I don't have an argument with those who are for it. And I don't have an argument to those people who are against it. What we need to do is to be able to do the work and prepare the case and show how it was going to work. It's no point in having an election and you're saying to somebody, well, we're asking to support the new Ireland. We don't know the details. We'll work it out eventually. If you vote yes, we'll do it within a year or two. And if you vote no, well, we'll keep fighting for it. You can't do that. You have to work out, how are we going to integrate the North and the South? How are we going to integrate the criminal justice system? How are we going to implicate the PSNI and the Garda Síochána? How are you going to get the courts to work? How are you going to get business to work, farmers to work? So you have to.
But all those things you raised, is that all doable?
I think it's doable. I don't think it'll happen overnight, but I think it's doable. In fact, even the cost issue, I think is doable. I didn't even mention the cost issue, but no, I think it's doable, but it has to be done peacefully, in harmony, negotiated out. And I think that is possible. I mean, the united East Germany and West Germany, I mean, in our lifetime, if you think, God, you know, East Germany, West Germany, you know, one totally communist regime, the other fairly, you know, capitalist area, and they united that, and they were divided by walls, and you know, so I think, and they did that fairly quick, and they did the finances in good time. Of course, it caused some problems, but it didn't take that long. So I think it is doable, but it has to be planned, it has to be orchestrated, it has to be organised, but having quick votes about complicated things without the work being done is a recipe for disaster. And to be honest, people would, like if somebody knocked at your door canvassing and said, Nico and Jardine, will you vote for the new Ireland? And you'd say, well, how are we going to integrate? How are we going to get to school and our kids and get industry working, the trade unions, get all this stuff working? And they said, well, we don't know, but if you vote yes, we'll work it out eventually. So you're going to vote no, even those of us who would passionately believe in the idea of a. And
is there people actively trying to look at those or not, or is it all in the back? You know,
there is work going on, but to use the motor car, the old motor car. You need to go from maybe first gear to fourth gear. You know, I think it needs to be pushed on. And
whose job is that? Is that the Taoiseach's job? Is that the Prime Minister's job?
Yeah, I think Dáil Éireann, I think it's a collective effort of all the political parties, because I think it's something they have to do together. And I also think there's a big input from organisations. I think, you know, you need the farmers getting more friendly with the farmers, the fishermen, and these are already there. Actually, the farmers are usually ahead of people on these issues. They're amazing in some ways. The trade union is already a national movement. You need the guards working on the guards. That'd be a tricky one. But maybe it's not as tricky now, since there was a former head of the PSNI as head of the guard. So these things, like if I had said 20 years ago, the head of the guard will be a PSNI job. Now he's near the end of his excellent term, and you know he's done a good job, and there's others there. So these things are all doable, and I'd just like to see it maybe quickened up a bit.
If you were still there, would it be a little bit quicker? Would you?
Anyway, this is unfair to when you're not there, but I think I'd probably be saying it more often.
You addressed Congress in the United States. I remember we watched that live. Unfortunately, I was on tour with Westlife. We couldn't make it over. But when you were over there, there's a funny story. I mean, what a proud moment you must have been. That must have been one of the proudest moments, was it?
That was a happy day. I think Westminster, the two of them were important. I think Westminster, because
both houses of Parliament, Commons and Lords, and Congress in the United States,
and huge attendances of both. I mean, that was kind of struck me more than anything else, that like practically everybody turned up in Westminster, in the Lords and the Commons, and all the key faces that I would know. You look back at the video, you see them, and the same so they were two. And there's only a handful of people have actually addressed the two still.
Actually, the cans there, have a little look at this. This is you, just a little clip of you in Congress.
The Prime Minister of Ireland.
St. Patrick's Day 2008, a few short weeks ago, I came here to Washington. I came with a simple and an extraordinary message. That great day of hope has dawned. Our prayer has been answered. Our faith has been rewarded. After so many decades of conflict, I am so proud, Madam Speaker, to be the first Irish leader to inform the United States Congress Ireland is at peace. Your invitation to address the joint meeting this morning honours my country and honours me also. It reaffirms the enduring bonds of friendship and esteem between our two peoples and between our two republics. Those bonds have been built and nurtured and refreshed over the centuries. America and Ireland have something that goes beyond the friendship between countries. To be an Irishman among Americans is to be at home.
When you watch this back, Bertie, I know you don't do emotion too good, but it must make you proud.
Yeah, it was a great day, and it's great to see so many of those great faces there and people. The interesting Ted Kennedy, I went from there back to the Kennedy Museum on the following day, I think, and I think that was probably one of Ted Kennedy's last speeches. Right. He got the brain hemorrhage after that and died, so it was and he was the one who wrote the resolution, because in America you have to, somebody has to put forward a motion and then everyone signs up, but he actually wrote the resolution to invite me for that particular.
If memory serves me correctly, he actually sent myself and Georgina some Boston Harvard stuff for Rocco and Jay when they were born in 2007. He sent well wishes.
He was a great man, and I met his wife only a few months ago. She's ambassador now in Prague, I think it was, and she's a really good person, very, very pro-Irish, and they always help Ireland in every way they can.
Just onto that mic slide, there you go. Tell me this, Bertie, when you see that, or does it bring you back, were you nervous? I mean, that's a big deal.
That was a big deal, actually. The interesting thing, the night before, of all nights, I needed my rest, but a fire broke out in the hotel. And we had to vacate the rooms. Now, I should have stayed in bed. It wasn't that bad. But I remember poor Charlie Bird, the late Charlie Bird, charging around, reporting back that our hotel was ablaze.
That's funny because I was away with Westlife in New Zealand or something. We didn't manage to go, but Cecilia went over, and she tells a funny story that when the alarm went off, every office in the corridor, but the CIA or the Secret Service, whoever's looking after you, literally grabbed you and went, "He's coming with us," and that you were gone, and Cecilia was like, "What about me?"
I told them about it. Everyone was back in the rooms about half an hour before they released me back, and I wanted to get some sleep.
Where did they bring you?
Oh, they brought me to one of these, FBI hangars or something. In case it was total nonsense. But anyway,
and are they informing you? Are they updating you? What's happening?
No. I mean, I wasn't sure whether the hotel was burned out or not. But anyway, I just wanted to get back to bed because I needed a bit of rest before we'd already had a busy day, the day before. So I needed to get some sleep.
After you did that, obviously you did the House of Commons, which you touched on, and the Lords, which was pretty amazing. Again, and we must say, as a Republican son, to do that, not many people have addressed both. I think Ronald Reagan and a few others have done it.
5 or 6, I think. Mandela, I think.
No Irish Taoiseach has ever done it, no?
No.
Okay, which is pretty amazing. Right, when you decided to step down, my memory of that is you came to see myself and Georgina, and the kids were very young, probably a year, and you told us, I think on a Sunday, did you step down on a Monday or a Tuesday?
Tuesday or Wednesday,
yeah. And you told us on the Sunday, and we've a clip of you actually. I think there you go, the picture of you there. But were you emotional? Were you sad? Was it the right time? What was going through your mind?
I don't. It came to a stage. I'd won the third election. We had things fairly well settled in the north, and so far as it's settling. And you knew like you could have. My aim was kind of to go to the 2009 locals, which would have been about little bit over a year later. And then I said after that, that I'll have done my period. So I would have liked to push it out closer to the end of the decade. But I reckon, there wasn't much more to be doing. I mean, in our system, to stay on that long was, you felt you'd got a good run.
Yeah.
Another year would have been even better, but it didn't. So I didn't lose too much sleep over it.
So do you look back at it all now very fondly? Do you have good memories?
Yeah, looking back, and I've stayed involved and you stayed active, and you need to do that. I did a lot of traveling. I was involved in different countries. I did a lot in Papua New Guinea, and I've done the Basque country. Today I was with our friends from Cyprus. I was just preparing before I came to you, Nico. I was dealing with some people for the Interaction Council, which is I co-chair with President Obasanjo in Nigeria. Dealing with some issues. We have a meeting coming up shortly. People from leaders from all over the world. So I keep not horrendously busy, but I keep active and involved, and then I still spend a lot of time in the north. And through that, you're dealing with people. I do the George Mitchell School that's in his name, and because George has got old now, and even though he's coming again soon, hopefully, and so is Hillary. With Hillary Clinton, I still stay very involved in it, so that keeps me more than active.
Last few questions. What did you think of me when you first met me in '94?
I thought you were a lovely lad from Baldile. And the fact you were a Manchester United Dub supporter definitely made it. See, there's these basic things that are important. Now, I remember and I was, needless to say, hoping that you were going to be on the first team with Leeds, and that I'd get tickets to their box forevermore. And then you were clever. You came back here and made a great career at Westlife. Even better.
What do you honestly think of the Westlife concerts?
I think they're brilliant. No, I do. I've lucky enough. I'm looking at your lovely wall there of the last one where I was honoured to be
in Radio City.
Yeah. And then I'd seen you in Wembley.
Yeah.
We've seen in umpteen other places too. So no, I think Westlife. I mean, you've had an extraordinary, and I think you know it, but you've had an extraordinary successful career as a group, and huge popularity. And I think long may it last.
Although we could do with your negotiation skills now, and a few times through the years I could have. I've called upon you a few times to give me a bit of advice.
That's always the way with life. There's always but hopefully, listen. There's no reason that you can't get when you see Mick Jagger charging around the place at 150 or whatever age he is.
If you have any advice for young people, say my kids, your grandkids, obviously I have 3 and Angelina's 3, myself, Angelina, and then Cecilia and Dave have 3. And all the generations coming up behind you and behind me.
I think there's nothing easy in life. I think it's important in life that you enjoy yourself, and that you participate in whatever interests. I mean, whether it's the arts or sport, I kind of see them all as sport. You need to be involved. Some people aren't interested in sport, as you and I know sport, but they're interested in the arts. So I think whether it's the arts or sport, people are involved in it. But, the Shakespeare's, a long time ago since Shakespeare said, if all the year were sport and holiday, sport would be as tedious as to work. But when they seldom come, they wish to come. And I think that's the way it should be. I think the easy life should be something that you wish to come and you enjoy. That means a good bit of the rest of it has to be about work and effort. And I think not always, but most of the time, unless you're unlucky, what you put into it, you'll more or less get out of it. You might feel you should have got a bit more, but if you don't put it in, and I think for kids, education is hugely important. And I think learning about a life, learning experience. And I know some of that just comes with being older. Because some of the things I would have done or said when I was 25 wouldn't be what I'd say now in my 70s. But I think you have to work at it. And if you don't work in school. And in college. And the great thing about college now is college is far more inclusive than it was when I was there. I mean, now you can do everything and anything. Yeah. And, you don't have to have 690 points or whatever is the max point. But I do think getting, broad education and putting in the effort, and, maybe we spend too much time on the road playing. Nowadays, they spend too much time looking at those stupid screens. So, but I think that is just the way life rolls on. Yeah. But I think if you work at it, you'll get the rewards. Okay. And it's easier now, but it's not easy. Yeah. It's not easy. It's never easy. Yeah. But there are far more opportunities. You think of it. When the day I was Minister for Labour, Charlie Haughey said to me, "Your job is to keep unemployment under 20%. It was 19.8. And 19.8, but today unemployment is probably 4%. There was under 1 million people working in my first year as Minister of Labour. Now there's 2.7 or 2.8 million working in this country. So, the opportunities now are so much better. But you have to work to get those opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. Right, there's 2 more things, Bertie. I'm going to ask you to put together a boy band of politicians. Okay. Now we're going to need 5 names, right? 5 lads, and one of them inevitably is going to leave. If you look at Brian McFadden, if you look at Robbie Williams and others. So 5 lads. They don't have to be good singers. Just 5. They're just 5 lads that you think would make up a good political boy band. Who would you go with? You can go anyway. You can put yourself in there.
I can pick.
Anyone you like of today, of your era, of years gone by. You can put Dev in there if you want. You can put if you like.
Well, we had a few. We had a few good. Tom Kiss used to be a good guitarist, so he was around in my time. Okay. I suppose if I was looking around the Labour Party, Rory Quinn was a good old buddy of mine. He's a good guy in this. I don't know if he can sing for Adams. I haven't got a clue.
So you got Tom Kitt, Rory Quinn. I remember Rory. Remember Tom as well.
Yeah. So we have to get somebody from
Fine Gael.
Have to get somebody from Fine Gael. I'm trying to remember if any of them could sing in my day. I can't remember any of them, but there were a lot of good. Sean Barrett, who was a very good friend of mine, was a sound guy.
Okay,
represented Dunleary constituency. That's three. That's three. We better put in. I better put in a Sinn Féin person from somewhere. I'm not sure what Sinn Féin. And there was a guy down in Waterford who was singing, but I think he was singing the wrong song, so we better not give. we better not put him into it. And we better put Mary Lou, since she's in my own constituency.
Mary Lou's in there. And then we've one more. That's four, isn't it? Are you going to put yourself in, no?
I'll go in. Okay. I'll go in. I definitely can't sing. I'll manage it.
And if one's got to leave out of all those characters, who'd be the one now to be a little bit impatient? They go, to hell with it, I'm out.
It's a good question now. I'd say maybe Rory Quinn.
So Rory Quinn's the Robbie Williams and the Brian McFadden.
He'd probably make more money every time.
Well, listen, it's been absolutely brilliant. I have one last question. That's I suppose the one that everyone's going to want to know in this podcast is about the upcoming presidency. So is that some? I know your answer. I was away with all of us in the summer, and little Gia, my daughter, said, "Grandad, are you going to go for presidency?" And you just went, you go for it. You go for it, Gia. So what would you like to say about the presidency? I'm not even going to ask you.
It comes up every day, Nick, okay. and I get emails and letters and phone calls about it. And, not all saying you should go, and some saying you shouldn't. There are a number of factors, and there's probably, because people always say, you must have thought it out a bit. And I have thought about it a bit, but I have not near came to any conclusion. But there are a number of factors. And on the good side, I'm on the Council of State, which is what advises the President now for 26 years. Before that, I was in the department. So in various departments of finance, I was in the Taoiseach's department, the SWIP. I was Taoiseach, meeting the President every month. So the operation of how it works and the link between the President and the executive, how it works, I know the detail inside out. I don't think there's anyone who knows it better in the country. The second thing is, the President does two jobs. They do the job around the country, and they do the job externally. Well, I've been everywhere in this country. I don't think there's any. And then if you look at external, I've been the European Council for 20 years. You've seen me there on the clips that you've shown. I've been all these. So there, but I don't think there's anyone around that has that experience, quite frankly. Maybe someone would say that, but I don't think there is if you look at it in a fair way. And then you come to the harder questions. I joined Fianna Fáil at 19. Would you get a nomination? Haven't got a clue. Don't know who in Fianna Fáil would want it or what is thinking of it. You might not get a nomination. If you didn't get a nomination, I don't think there's much point. Running as independent, you don't have an organisation, don't have a structure, you don't have the finances, you don't have anything. So that's a question mark. Then you get the question, would you get any public support other than the 100 people that write? Would you get 5%? Would you get 10%? Or would you have a meaningful chance of getting anywhere? Because if like anything, if you don't have a meaningful chance, there's no point in wasting your time. And then there's the last question, which is probably the hardest. So I've given two there that I think I'm definitely the greatest candidate. And I've given two where I might be totally the last guy in the list for the candidate. And the last one is, at 74 next year when it comes up, you don't know how many more years you get in your life. Would you want to spend, even if you were elected, would you want to spend the last 7 years of your life again slogging and beating yourself up and having limited time to be with the kids and you and me allotment and all going to football matches? And that's a hard one, If you said it to me at 64, you'd say, well, yeah, good chance. But when you say 74, you give you mightn't get to the 81 to be to actually do that. Now, I know I know even when you're finished, if you did live and if your health was good enough, you'd be still younger than the man that wants to be president of America. But I'm not sure I think the same as him. So we'll see. But one way or the other, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. So we'll see how it plays out.
Well, Bertie, let me finish by saying this. I know history will be kind to you. I just hope all the nice things are said while you're alive instead of when you're gone and you don't get to see them. But I want to thank you for being a brilliant father-in-law, a brilliant granddad, and for securing peace on this island and for allowing many, many other grandkids come up and enjoy the fruits of this country. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nico.